Welcome everyone to tonight's school committee meeting. We apologize for the little bit of a late start. We had a couple of members that were busy with some other school committee business and they hustled over here, but we do have our quorum, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Steve Mark, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. So we have a consent agenda, the minutes from February 11th, 2016, and oath to bills and payroll.
I make a motion to approve this consent agenda as read.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Very good. Interested citizens. If there are any interested citizens who would like to speak on any matters relative to the school committee, now is one of your two opportunities. Gretchen, could you just come up to the microphone, please? Just your name and your street and whatever you want to talk about.
Hi, Gretchen Webster, Bulkley Road, and I want to extend deep thanks on behalf of the parents of all the students who got to go to Washington for the Lemkin Summit, of which we have a contingent back there, to Mrs. Harvey for her extraordinary effort and the gift of her time, her leadership, her inspiration, her own resources, because I understand she gives of what she has quite generously to the students for supplies and books, and for making what could, I believe, be a life-changing experience happen for our students. So we're very, very grateful. Thank you, Susan.
So when I was getting into the high school, I saw Susan Harvey in the halls working, and it was like 5:30, and now you're here, so... Are they giving you a late start or something? Or?
All right, any other interested citizens? All right, seeing none, we're going to move into acknowledgements.
And we'll start with Brian.
Okay. At the Russell Street, the end of Term 2 is on Friday, and report cards are going to be sent home on March 7th. At the middle school, the end of Term 2 and an Earthview presentation are this Friday. At the high school, there's an SAT boot camp this weekend, as well as a student-staff basketball game and principal's breakfast March 3rd. Finally, the National Honor Society blood drive is being held on March 10th.
Excellent, thank you.
Can I just ask, what time of the day is the student-staff basketball game?
What time of the day?
Yeah, is it a night
It's a night. Well,
thing?
yeah.
What day of the week is that?
Thursday.
Thursday?
Thursday.
We're going to find out tomorrow what the schedule is for the boys and girls varsity basketball divisional playoffs, and they're both going to have home games, so we just need to be
We
cognizant.
just moved it, yeah.
Okay, just need to be cognizant of that. All right, thank you.
That won't be a problem to move, like we talked about some other events.
When's the blood drive?
The blood drive is,
During the day?
yeah, that's during the day. That's over
Yeah.
at 1 o'clock, so that's...
Blood drive runs all day.
All right, any other acknowledgements?
Just a few. I'd like to thank Mrs. Bridge and the parents who chaperoned the Disney World trip. Our students did great, had a great performance, and brought back a golden Mickey Mouse as a trophy. So looking forward to seeing that. These trips obviously take a lot of time, dedication, and leadership, fundraising, and we're very fortunate to have staff in our district that go way beyond teaching in the classroom. Our students do truly gain a lot from going on field trips and get exposed to things that they otherwise probably wouldn't have an opportunity to experience. So thanks again to Mrs. Bridge for making that trip possible. We have a freshman, Katie Stratton, who qualified for the Massachusetts Music Educators Association Eastern District Choir, which is quite an accomplishment. So congratulations, Katie. Third acknowledgement, our indoor track. Congratulations to all the participants who took part in the state track meet. Our 4x400 girls relay team actually set a record. So congratulations to Atlanta Storm, Caitlin Leonard, Emma Hartzell, and Hannah Tovsey. We also had Hunter Gray, second time for our district, for our high school more correctly, that we had an all-star track and field athlete, and Hunter Gray certainly represented us well, and what a terrific job to come back with that title. Littleton Broomfield high school hockey team, first time in history that they're co-conference champions, so lots of great news on the front, and they're co-champions with Assabet. Many of you know we have partnerships with other schools, and one we really haven't talked about for a long time is our partnership between Parker, Concord, Carlisle, and Littleton gymnastics team. They placed 7th at the Maya North sectional meet, so congratulations to them as well. Our basketball team, both girls and boys, will be in divisional playoffs, so quite an exciting winter season. And that's it for my acknowledgements.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move into presentations, and the first one we're going to kick off with is we had mention of the Lemkin Summit, and we have Ben Church, Antoine Clement from Mrs. Harvey, and Michael Webster from Mrs. Harvey's class, so they're going to talk about the trip they made to Washington. This wasn't like a lark, they actually had something to do down there.
It was a free time.
Remember, she'd like to roll with the white.
It won't amplify your voice, but it is on, it goes right into the TV feed, but thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here. It means a lot to us to present, make this presentation. And also, thank you so much to Ms. Harvey for taking us. It was quite a blast, and as you'll see, we learned a lot about world conflicts, mass atrocities, and how we can solve these issues. We're seniors from Littleton High School, from the Facing History class. I'm Antoine Clement.
I'm Ben Church. And I'm Michael Webster.
And we're here to present our trip to the Lemkin Summit. So we're going to get started. So what is the Lemkin Summit? It's a conference that happens every year in Washington, D.C. It's a 3-day event where activists and panelists from around the world meet and talk about world issues such as genocide and mass atrocities. And we're fortunate enough to have very, very cool people meet us there and talk about their experience in the field of their work in activism, especially in Africa. We also had, as you'll see later in the presentation, Ambassador Power as our keynote speaker. And on the final day of this event, we actually got the chance to lobby at Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and talk to the representatives of our senators about these issues and what we want as constituents of Massachusetts, what we want to do to solve these issues. So this was a really cool event, and I hope you learn a little bit more about what we did in this presentation. This is a picture of our class in front of the Supreme Court. We were fortunate to have beautiful weather throughout the weekend, and on Friday we took the opportunity to be in D.C. to tour around, see all the impressive buildings. So we just posed in front of the Supreme Court, so that was nice. So the conference was held at American University in D.C., and they gave us a pretty big room to host everybody. For 2 days, we actually had panelists come in, talk to us about these issues, then we had group work to talk about it. On the first day, we worked a little more on the conflicts themselves, and the second day, we talked about what activism is and how to prepare ourselves for Lobby Day. So Ben's got to talk about the Enough Project.
So we had the privilege to meet the founding director of the Enough Project, John Prendergast, on the far left. He is a leading civil rights activist, and he's been fighting for civil rights in Africa for over 30 years. He's a best-selling author, and he has worked with major actors like George Clooney and Matt Damon. And the Enough Project is a nonprofit organization based out of Washington, D.C. It was founded in 2007, and its main goal is to fight mass atrocities and genocide in Africa and other areas of the world. So do you want to? We also had the chance to hear from Ambassador Power. Antoine actually had the chance to ask her a few questions, so that was very cool to see her. We did a Skype interview with her. So she, with John Prendergast, talking to her. They're actually very good friends, so it was very interesting to see the relationship and what she had to say about the United Nations and what's happening in Africa with the genocides and mass atrocities that are going on.
And adding on to that point, Ambassador Power, she's the ambassador of the U.S. to the United Nations, if you didn't know. And she works in day out to solve genocide across the world. She's very good friends with President Obama, and we hope that she continues doing the incredible work that she's doing. So we're going to do a very general overview of the conflicts we learned about. Obviously, these conflicts are very, very complex and involve a lot of different aspects to them, such as religion, race, power, resources. But I'll talk a little bit about South Sudan. South Sudan is the newest nation in our world right now, but it's also the poorest country in the world. Violence began 3 years ago now in the country when it gained its independence. The main reason for that violence is that large sources of oil were discovered in the south of the country. And obviously, as you can imagine, a lot of militias, and especially the government, are fighting to gain control of those lands for their own benefits. And that has displaced 2.2 million people, and more every day are being killed and displaced. And one statistic I'll mention is that 70% of the country's resources are spent on military, and this is because the President Kiir is trying to hold on to power desperately. And he's spreading violence all across the nation to keep power.
So I'll give a brief overview of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And there has been armed conflict in the country since the mid-1990s, mostly amidst the government of the country and the military of the country and other rebel groups. You may have heard of the M23 or the Lord's Resistance Army, and there are other armed groups in the area. But essentially, the populace of the country is caught in the crossfire between all of these armed groups, including the very repressive military. And a byproduct of this violence is that sexual violence has become rampant throughout the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And one sobering statistic is that 1,100 women are raped every day in the DRC. And right now, a lot of the political turmoil is centered around the president who is not stepping down, is in risk of violating the Constitution and propelling the country into a civil war. Now, another unstable country in the region is the Central African Republic, in which there are more armed groups and more civilians caught in the crossfire. This one is more tied up into religion, but really there is a lot of cross-religious violence going on, especially around the illegal diamond trade. Now, I don't know if you've seen maybe the movie Blood Diamonds or have heard of the Kimberley process, but essentially, the acting international laws against illegal diamond trade or blood diamond trade, in which slave labor is a common piece of the trade. This international law is not being followed, and in fact, the diamonds are facilitating the violence in the country.
And last but not least, Burundi and Rwanda. The Rwanda genocide is quite famous, as probably all of you know. It killed nearly 1 million people back in 1994 in just a very short time of 3 months. This conflict was mainly based on religion, with tensions rising between the Tutsi and Hutu populations. Although perpetrators of the genocide have been caught, there are still many perpetrators of this genocide that are running around in Congo and other countries around, spreading more terror, spreading more genocide. And once again, the political instability of the country is not helping, and also fight for resources and other factors are still going on in Burundi and Rwanda. And especially in Burundi, as we learned in the conference, there's more risk, the risk of a new genocide in Burundi with new political instability in the country. So, to a new note, we'll talk about what we can do as a school and what our country can do to solve these issues, because these issues are really bad. Actually, on Lobby Day, the first person we met was Mr. Dugan. He's a legislative aide to Representative Tsongas from Massachusetts. And we met with him to talk about the Global Amnesty Human Rights Accountability Act. To keep it short, the purpose of this act is to give our president the ability to sanction non-U.S. individuals across the world for committing genocide. And this act basically gives the president the ability to impose sanctions, and sanctions are economic tools that we can use, such as withholding a visa, freezing assets, freezing bank accounts. And although this won't stop individuals from committing genocide, it stops their progress, because anyone who commits genocide is funded with a lot of money, obviously. They need money to buy weapons, buy resources. So by doing this, we are preventing them from moving around the world to gain access to weapons, and also putting their money in accounts offshore. So we asked Mr. Dugan if he was willing to co-sponsor this bill, because it was passed by the Senate, but it has not yet been passed by the House. So we asked Mr. Dugan if he could talk to his boss, Representative Tsongas, so that she could sponsor this bill.
So another person we met with was one of Elizabeth Warren's aides, Faraz, I think was his name.
Ross Lehman.
Yeah, Faraz Lehman. So as you can see, only half of us were there. We had to leave a little early. But a bill we talked about is the Global Anti-Poaching Bill, which is a bill to take stand against the illegal poaching in Africa. This poaching and trafficking of ivory finances illegal crime, some militias, and these warlords use this to commit genocide and mass atrocities. So this bill will cut off their funding and hopefully help African security forces to enforce the poaching that is committed. And it's really a major source of money for these warlords. So this is why we are trying to lobby this bill with Senator Warren's aid. And it's actually currently in the Senate. It has passed the House, so it's on the move in a positive way. So we're pretty excited about that.
So not only did we get to meet with staff from Senator Warren's office, but we also got to meet with staff from Senator Markey's office. That was another kind of lobbying that takes place in the hall, so we didn't get to pose for a picture. But the fortunate thing is, at that very moment, the staff that we were meeting with from Senator Markey's office were working on the bills that we were about to propose and sponsor. One of those is the Genocide Atrocities Prevention Act, or GAPA. And the main purpose of this act is to authorize the Atrocities Prevention Board. Now, what the Atrocities Prevention Board is another big name, which I'll explain. The President created the Atrocities Prevention Board in 2010 in order to coordinate the government's approach towards combating mass atrocities and genocide. But it was never authorized by the legislative process. So, with the new president coming in, there was a great risk that the Atrocities Prevention Board would be no longer. So what this act, GAPA, is doing is authorizing the Atrocities Prevention Board, institutionalizing it, and creating a lasting place in the American government for combating genocide. And luckily, we just got emails a few days ago that Senators Markey and Warren were original co-sponsors for GAPA. So what we did is actually working right now.
That's great.
So another thing that we can do on a more local level with our school is support organizations or NGOs, non-governmental organizations, abroad. And the one that we chose to support is called Maman Shuja, or Hero Women of the Congo. And Maman Shuja is an organization which is led by Nema Namandutu. And that woman, who is this woman, teaches women in the Congo how to operate computers, which is a critical thing for entering the workforce and empowering women in a country where, as we said, rape is an everyday thing.
I'll say one thing about that last slide. We found out about this woman on a feature film screening we watched. The movie's called Mercy Congo. It's very good about conflict minerals. Should be coming out soon, so I recommend it to everybody. So what we propose, and actually we are doing, is bracelets we are making, which say, "Together we end genocide." We want to sell these at lunch and try to get the word out. And all the proceeds will be donated to Mama Shusha. And so this is something we want to do on the local level to help.
And finally, thank you for sending us all there.
Don't walk away yet, because after you do something like this, you look like you were bolting. Questions or comments, Alex?
Sure. They're organizers. They'll never walk away until they get what they came for. I think this is wonderful. I think this is absolutely wonderful. So professionally, I'm a legislative aide in the State House in Boston, so we're not quite as fancy. But I can tell you that those hallway meetings matter just as much, if not more, than the sit-down meetings. And it's so important to have young people in the process. As a person who got involved in politics and political advocacy at a young age, when you get older, you realize you're a lot less potent as an advocate. So start young, keep it up, and I think it's just wonderful that you guys went down there, that you're learning about the issue, that you're trying to affect change at the congressional level, and then you said, you know what, that's not enough. We're going to go and try to support his NGOs as well. That multifaceted, multi-pronged approach is, unfortunately, I think, a reality today for a lot of issues we're trying to change, no matter what the issue is. And it's wonderful that you guys are taking this on, that you're pursuing it. And as with all of Mrs. Harvey's projects, it's something that, no matter how you felt about it when you started, you never end thinking, oh, this is just another project. This is something that I can tell from the presentation that you guys are in this, you're really excited about it, you're passionate about it. And that's when you know you've got the bug and when you're hooked. So thank you. I'm officially diagnosing you. And this was wonderful. We talk about civics a lot, and I know we've had conversations a couple of years ago about, well, how would we like to integrate civics more? And surely there are so many things we'd like to do. But this is such a great example of how we were doing so much with the resources we have before us. And would we want to do more on civics and every other issue? Sure. But this is excellent. I could not be prouder.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
No, thank you very much for the presentation. I really appreciate you bringing these issues that you learned about firsthand there and then bringing them back to us. And, you know, it made quite a powerful impression upon me. I assume it made quite an impression upon yourselves while you were there. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Our pleasure.
I just have two questions for you. One is, when do the bracelets go on sale?
They're arriving, and I think midweek next week, and immediately, as of then.
And other than the bracelets, what's next?
Well, sure, yeah. It's a developing issue. Continued support for the class, enthusiasm, further education.
Yeah, we also are planning to follow up with the people we met in DC with emails and talk to them about other steps we can take. So we are on that step too.
That's true. We have been corresponding with our senators,
Yeah.
which I'm sure they're all personally reading.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah.
Sometimes. That would be exciting.
Good. Guys, your command of the material and your ability to present it extemporaneously the way you did clearly shows that you've mastered it beyond just taking a class, and that's impressive. And as someone who was encouraged to read newspapers by the time I was 18 and do it every day and go buy one every day, as Alex said, you've got the bug. You will continue to be invested, and it will be to your benefit, but more importantly to the benefit of the others around you. So it's a lesson that not everybody gets to learn at such a young age, but if you don't learn at a young age, it gets harder and harder to learn it, and gives you the opportunity to be less and less impactful. So good luck and have fun doing it. It's worthwhile. Congratulations. And thank you, Mrs. Harvey. Very well done. They clearly have, to be able to come up here and do this outside the classroom, that's hard to do, and it's a reflection of the way they've been taught.
I'm very proud of them.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks, guys. All right, now we're going to have another one of our cost center presentations, and it's Alex's turn.
Here we go. So this is our second to last cost center presentation for the year. Just to give a quick overview, we've been doing this over the last couple of months. We break our budget down into a number of cost centers, and as an effort to explain more about what goes into our budget and what our budget situation is like before we present a budget coming up next month. Before that happens, we wanted to dive into each cost center a little more in detail throughout the year when we're less rushed, so that once the full budget hits, we're all ready for it. So special education is one of our biggest cost centers. It's a total of about $6 million. That's made up of salaries and expenses, and it's special education and student services. So even if a student doesn't have an IEP, which is generally what you would think of what one definition of special education might be, it also includes 504s and services like that. So within that we have salaries and expenses, and I'll just break it down. It's pretty straightforward. For salaries, you've got teachers, assistants, specialists from ABA, psychologists. That has moved around a little bit over the past couple of years depending on the needs of the district, as well as summer programs, SPED assistants, and things of that nature. And then again, that's the bulk of the special education cost centers and the salaries, which is also true of the regular education cost center. In terms of expenses, you see OOT, that's out of district tuition, out of district placement tuition for CASE Collaborative, which is a collaborative that we belong to, and Superintendent Clenchey happens to be the chair of CASE this year, which I think is an opportunity for us to learn more about everything that they're doing. At least it has been for me, that I've enjoyed. So CASE is a collaboration of local school districts that come together, pool their resources, and say, we might not have enough students with this particular learning disability to serve them all in our district, but if we pool our resources, it might be cheaper than sending them to a private facility. So that OOT tuition line item includes both CASE, which is the bulk of where most of our students go, and also to the private expenses, where sometimes CASE can't meet those needs, or the best fit is outside of CASE and outside of Littleton Public Schools, so that's when we'll head to private. Those tend to be a little costlier, but it's something that we have to do, and we have a responsibility to educate all of our students, and this is the way that we do that. Also, consulting services, which is not included in salary simply because it's consulting, not full-time, just as needed on perhaps ad hoc's not the right term, but not a full-time staff member of LPS. And then other expenses, whether that's everything from mails, curriculum materials, things of that nature. It comes down pretty small to $66,000. That's the total expenses. So that brings us to the $6 million mark, but it doesn't include some of our revolving funds. Circuit breaker is a big thing that we talk about every year. For those of us who are less familiar with circuit breaker, that's essentially a mechanism that the state uses to reimburse us for part of special education costs. It kicks in 4 times after, let me figure out the easiest way to explain this. So the state will look at the average cost per pupil of the district. Let's say, for example, it's $10,000. It's not, but let's say it's $10,000. The circuit breaker will kick in after any given student exceeds 4 times that amount. So let's say you have a student who we send out of district and whose needs are, we spend $50,000 meeting that student's needs. That means that at $40,000, they exceed that 4 times the special education amount. The circuit breaker reimburses us for a percentage of every dollar spent above that. So the first $40,000 we are responsible for. After that, so that remaining $10,000 in this hypothetical situation, the state will reimburse us for. After the fact, so usually the following year is when we'll receive the money, and we'll budget it for that year, sometimes the following year, depending on when it hits. And so what that has looked in recent years is, if we're lucky, maybe 73, 75%, I think, is sort of the high water mark of when we've been most fortunate for that circuit breaker reimbursement, which means if you have that $50,000 student that, maybe something happens right away, there's a new diagnosis, we say we want to get that student to the right classroom right away, that's something that we pay day one. We immediately start paying for that child's education in the new placement. So that $50,000 cost is borne by the current fiscal year. It could happen tomorrow. We could have a $50,000 change, and suddenly we have to find that money. And we've done a pretty good job making it work, using our revolving funds, using the money that comes in and out. And sometimes we've had tougher years than others, but the costs have been going up over time. So when that happens, so for that $50,000 expense, when that happens, if we are lucky, if it's funded relatively high, we will get $7,500 back from the state the following year, which is not nearly enough of what the cost is, and which leads to some difficult conversations. But we're appreciative of every dollar we get, because it goes towards special education costs. So that's an important conversation that I think when we usually dive into budget, we're already on the same page about what's circuit breaker, but I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about what that is in a more public setting when we're not looking at the numbers in front of us. The actual per pupil cost is, I think, somewhere around $13,000 and change.
Yeah, around 13 too.
We try to keep those costs, constrained as much as possible, but we have to meet the needs of the kid. We want to meet the needs of the kid, and in fact, it's our legal obligation to meet the needs of the child. So this is sort of the framework that we bring into this. One of the frustrations we've had over the last couple of years is the timing for when the money hits the account. So let's say it's May or May or April. Most of your money for the fiscal year has already been expended. You already know generally where the accounts are going to go. If a new family moves into the district, if there's a new diagnosis, if there's a new need, doesn't matter how much of your money you've already spent, as you should have spent, you got to figure out a way to make it happen. So we've been fortunate in the last couple of years to be able to work with our team, work with our teachers, work with our administrators, and work with the town to make that happen. Other districts are not so fortunate, and I think we're a pretty nimble, I think is the term that I'll use, a nimble district in terms of the way we manage our budget, particularly around special education, because it's tough, and there are so many needs in the district, and we meet the needs in the district, but there's always more that we want to do for special education, for regular education, for our buildings, for as much as possible. We would love to do more, but we do a pretty good job with what we have. Was that a understandable explanation, relatively, of circuit breaker? And this, we also talk about this more either later in the year or earlier in the year, but the funding mechanism for circuit breaker, again, it only kicks in after that 4 times the amount. The legislature hasn't added a lot of money to that in recent years. Certainly not enough. I think I can say fairly confidently that that's the opinion of the board. And then when you look at the mechanism for funding special education in general, that formula, so even if before the circuit breaker kicks in, this Chapter 70 formula, I think, accounts for 4% of students in a public school being special education. Our number is closer to, I think it's 17%, maybe it's 17% state average, and about 20% in Littleton, which is just a little bit higher. It's quite far off from 4%. So as times have progressed since the state created these funding formulas and these funding mechanisms, we have seen a much larger increase of the number of students with special needs, much greater variation in those needs that they present, costlier ways of addressing these needs, and fewer reimbursement from the state. So it's a tricky situation, and if you look at how public school districts across the Commonwealth have been spending money year over year over the last 15 or 20 years, you will see that proportionately, the biggest increases are in special education and healthcare costs, which means it's very difficult for us to make do with everything else because money needs to come from somewhere. That said, I think we do as good a job as we can, given the resources we have. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about that background, because once we get, usually once we get into our budget debates later on in the springtime, we talk about revolving funds, we talk about circuit breaker, what can you use it on, when can you use it, when does it hit the account, and this hopefully provides some context for all of that. Does anyone have any questions?
You all set with the whole presentation? The comment I would make relative to some of the things you guys were talking about earlier is, relative to circuit breaker, is it's not, we can't count on it because it's not codified in legislature. It's at their discretion. And Alex talks about, you're right, the last several years, it's been around 75% after the 4-time mark, but there were years where it was more like below 50%. And you don't know. We just don't know. They just decide after the fact, and they tell us what to do, but they don't tell us how to fund it. And it can be very difficult and anxiety-provoking. And we have been fortunate over the last several years that it hasn't harmed us, but it's like Damocles' sword hanging over you. When is it going to come down? And it has in the past, and we'll see if it happens again. They're dealing with issues, but their unwillingness to help us plan can make things difficult.
And that fluctuation from at that high water mark of 75%, it's not necessarily a fluctuation to 68%. I think the last couple of years, the lowest it was in the high 30s.
Yeah,
so
it was rough.
Let's say we had a student in October of this school year where we needed to spend a lot more money to meet their needs. We're happy to do it. We'd love to be able to afford to do it, and we try to be able to afford to do it as much as possible. That happens in October. The legislature will set their reimbursement for that the following June. Last year it was July when it was set in stone, and then that money is dispersed throughout that year, which means we can then budget with it the following year. So it makes it pretty difficult to know. And in the year that student was having that expense borne, we might have been being reimbursed at 75%. But the year that we actually get the money, it could be 38%. And again, we'll take what we can get, but I wanted to illustrate the timeline is very difficult. And then the circuit breaker, you hear the term revolving fund, you think, oh, the school committee has lots and lots of money. The circuit breaker in particular can only be spent on special education costs anyway. So it helps us cover that, and it helps us be more nimble, but it's only part of the conversation. And when I think there was a misnomer, and I'm only repeating it to correct it preemptively, that there are reserves. They're revolving funds, they're not reserves. We use them every year. We hope on the good years we take in as much as we put out. We don't always have good years, and in recent years we've had to dip a little more into that, whether that's a circuit breaker or school choice or other funds, to make ends meet, both in special education and regular education.
For a number of years, we were fortunate with the CASE Collaborative. We were able to establish budgets from previous year enrollments, which stabilized our budget needs. The state, however, 2 years ago, decided that they didn't like payment in arrears. So I was vice chairman of the CASE Collaborative at that time, and we had to come up with a new formula and take a look at the money that we had and reallocate for the year that we had to bill direct costs to the district. So now, if a student moves in October, we pay the bill. Before, we would have had an idea of the total costs from the previous year, which would be easier to budget for, but that no longer exists. So if we had 2 students move in that were out of district, average costs for an out-of-district student's around $82,000. So you can see how vulnerable we can be very quickly, because we do have demographic changes throughout the year. We have people moving in and we have people moving out. So it creates a whole new dynamic to budgeting.
No, I appreciate the presentation there. I mean, and this is actually one area that I think we're trying to make sure that the selectmen see when we start talking about budget. They keep using the term level staffing, and that it's important for people to understand that's not the way we provide services. We have to provide a set of services. And this one here presents one of the biggest challenges when talking to the town about, well, we want you to keep your head count the same. Well, depending on the services we have to offer, that changes on a month-by-month basis, sometimes depending on the services coming in. So making sure that we're bridging this gap between, this is the reality of how we have to deliver services to our students versus the formal budgeting process is a critical piece here, because there's certain terms that get thrown around that we just can't use in terms of doing the budgeting. I'm hoping that this is helping explain to people why the school budget is different than some of the other service budgets in town.
I'm good.
Thank you, Alex.
I just had one more comment. Because it looks like we have such a captive student audience on this issue, which I think is wonderful, but not at all surprising given your recent lobbying efforts. If anyone wanted to go to the selectmen and talk about these issues, we would welcome the support. And if you'll allow me, the support that we give to facing history, to civics, to regular education, we love it. We can only do more of that with more funding.
It's important to realize as well that our first choice is to keep all students in our district. That's what we want. Sometimes, though, we don't have the critical mass of students to offer a program that would meet their needs, and that's why we access out-of-district placements. Through the years, we've brought back a significant number of students into our district when we have enough students, enough of a student body with a particular need to staff accordingly. Our high school, we brought a number of students back and created a program, so we're very proud of that. Our demographics, not just in Littleton, but throughout the state, are changing, and Case Collaborative, for example, is having to retool because the programs that they offered 5 years ago, a lot of schools have enough students now to offer those programs within their district. So the new programs that are emerging are designed for students with higher needs, and as a result, higher costs are required. Alex also mentioned contracted services. A number of times we have students that require very specialized services that we keep in district. And in order to avail them of the services that they need, it's much better for us to go out and find the experts rather than try to hire experts internally. It's more cost effective, and we have the advantage of tapping the pool of experts throughout the state. So it works out quite well. And students, a number of our students have very unique needs. Thanks, Alex. Great
Thank you.
presentation.
All right, we're going to move on to new business. First item is some water damage that we incurred at the high school.
Yeah, give me 1 second just to find those pictures for you, if I still have them up. All right, so I'm just going to flash through a couple of pictures. This is the teacher's room. This is the
Give us some background on
I'm
exactly
sorry.
what happened. I'm not sure.
Last week, John, was it Sunday?
Yeah.
This is in the teacher's room at the high school. There was a heating pipe into the univentilator. There's a hot water steam pipe that burst, and before anybody could react to it and figure out what was going on, this is the result. There was about 1.5 inches or 2 inches of water covering the entire floor of the teacher's room. It was because it was a hot water pipe. There was also a lot of steam involved as well. So ceiling tiles, all the papers, the copiers, everything just got drenched within that room. And then the water also filtered down through the ceiling into, unfortunately, the physics lab and the physics room, which is Dr. Hogan's room. And it destroyed the physics room and the physics lab. All of his laptops were destroyed. A lot of his equipment was destroyed. A lot of his handwritten notes that he had were all saturated and are not recoverable at this point in time. We had, as soon as it was discovered, we had our custodians respond to it. They did a phenomenal job. We also contacted Service Master, who came in and worked throughout the night, removing the water, removing the carpets, mitigating the amount of damage from the standing water that we had. Fortunately, because this was, I say fortunately, because it was a hot water pipe, it wasn't like a contaminated water. Like if it was a sprinkler, sometimes you get oils in that water and stuff like that. So that wasn't the case. So it was a fairly clean water, So cleanup was relatively straightforward, and Service Master came in and cleaned up both rooms that day. There was a little bit of damage in an adjacent classroom as well to the floor. At this point in time, all the carpets and the floors had been removed. The drywall that was damaged was cut out, the insulation's been removed, it's all been dried out. We're in the process now of reconstructing, getting vendors in to put carpet in and fix the drywall. We're working with the Maya insurance people on the claims and gathering those quotes and replacement costs, and Maya has been very responsive as well. So I'll just flash through a couple of pictures just so people can have a sense. That's the teacher's room, and John, chime in anytime because you know the school better than I do. This is Dr. Hogan's physics room downstairs. You can see if you look at the ceiling tiles, they were all saturated. They all came down. Some of them fell down on their own.
Those are all gone too. I mean,
Yeah.
Everything, all those ceiling tiles are all pulled up. It's just a gutted room now.
Yeah, we have a vendor coming in, I think tomorrow, to give us a replacement cost and to replace those units. You can see a lot of the equipment on the back wall. The water was just kind of coming down in waves against that wall. Ceiling tiles. Again,
That's the teacher's room.
that's the teacher's room. You can see that they had to go up a certain height on the drywall.
That's when the carpet
To
was
replace
there.
that,
And there's
right.
Before and after.
And there's before and after. So it was really unfortunate that it happened, and I hate to say it could have been worse, but it could have been worse. I really give a lot of credit to Fernando Fernandez, who is the head custodian, who responded immediately to go into the building and start taking care of things.
It was a huge team effort. I mean, even George Dumas is at
Yeah.
Shaker Lane, came over, he's local.
Yeah.
He came on site, helped us out. I'm learning about all kinds of people. Still, names are being popped up as we start talking about it. And Dave Pascucci, an English teacher and basketball coach, who you know well, would happen to be in the building that day.
Because we were going to a basketball game.
Right, he was. I guess he was the one who walked by. I got the message. I was away in Vermont. He called me. I got the voicemail, but before he was able to get me right away. He called Steve and several other people. I think he called you to notify you. But if not for Dave being in the building at that time, the water would have continued for I don't know how many hours and how much worse the damage would have been. It would have been significant. We can say that.
Yeah, the fire alarm was actually set off from the steam, so the fire department did respond. So I was in New York at the time, so
So that was triggered, okay.
But seriously, a real kudos to all those people that responded, the custodians. Service Master did a great job. The police department was, Matt Pinard helped us out and showed up and opened the building up for the Service Master people.
It's really a testament to the culture we've established in our district. I mean, all the senior administration was out of state, including myself. And it was a long weekend, and by the time Tuesday rolled around, we had a lot of the room gutted. And not only that, we were somehow able to secure a company to come in and start removing the damaged tiles and cutting out drywall, etc. And I'm sure you realize that we weren't the only ones that had water issues that weekend. So, very impressive that we were able to get a company to come in so quickly and have our own staff take care of it right away and change their plans, so to speak, to make sure everything was okay. So, Superintendent, I'm very proud of what I witnessed and accolades to everybody that was involved. They did a terrific job.
Valentine's Day, too. And Fernando was all set to go out with his wife, I think, and that didn't go over so well, but he had to change plans and deal with the crisis at the high school at the time.
So we're in the process of, like I said, ordering equipment, replacement laptops for the physics lab. We're in the process of working with the insurance company and the vendors and the contractors to reconstruct and tile and carpet, and we'll get that up and running as fast as possible. Right now, I really don't have an estimated date as to when those rooms will be running, but
That's the biggest question I'm getting as principal from the students now, too, who are super motivated to work in particularly dance class. We need to retile
Yep.
Wendy Sanford's room, which she's a chemistry physics teacher, as well as she teaches some other science courses. But Dan's room, getting that up and running and operational as soon as
Yep.
possible with the tools and laptops, all the high-tech stuff that he uses.
Yep.
The kids enjoy. He has an engineering club that enjoys that space as well. So I want to advocate for him tonight for anything we can do to expedite that
Yeah, it's-
process and get that date, get that equipment up and running, even if it's in increments. We understand that. The teachers' room, we've accommodated the teachers. Teachers have had positive attitudes and understand the situation. They've been relocated. Copiers, we're having some problems with the copiers. We're working with Rico and our service repair people on that. Steve's been very helpful with trying to interface with them. But that's definitely been inconvenience for the entire faculty, the copy machines that were damaged. But they're operational sometimes, and then they kind of break down. So we're actively discussing replacing those copiers.
Yep.
That's what I'm looking for. It's just, let's move the two that were damaged out of there and replace them with two new ones. Steve was going to, I think you're looking into that, whether that's
Yep, I'm
provided
working.
for in our contract arrangement with Rico. And then the other piece is just the teachers use that as a the teachers' room upstairs, they use that as a gathering space. That they're making do. There's been another space, the new LHS Bistro has opened up for them, so they're using that space for now, and that's worked out well for that piece. But I just want to give you an update on the teachers' room as well. That we're going to advocate for, rather than putting carpet in there, tile.
Yep, that's what I've submitted to the insurance company.
Yeah, in all the rooms. There's another room, Wendy Sanford's room was
Yep.
carpeted. It's time that should have been tiled anyway. Years ago, this gives us an opportunity to do that. So those are a couple of things.
Questions or comments, Mark?
No, Alex and I actually went through the damage. My one question is, for like the teacher's room and things, is there anything we can, in Hogan's room, can we do something to get them partially operational?
We're working on that. We're putting our purchase orders together with our vendors to order laptops and computers. As soon as we get those quotes, all we have to do is just bounce them off the insurance adjuster just to make sure it's in line with where he's at. But he's been very responsive. I email it, he gets right back to me. So hopefully by early next week, we'll have those orders and we'll have those orders placed.
Is all the equipment that Dr. Hogan had, that's all covered under insurance too?
Yeah, it's all school property and all covered under liability insurance.
Does that include the materials that were privately fundraised for? So even if the school didn't?
If they were privately fundraised, they would donate it to the school,
Okay.
and so they're school property, and so yes, everything's covered.
Excellent. Great.
Yep.
And then in terms of while those classrooms are out of service, where are those classes going for, imagine they're jumping around depending on the schedule.
Right. Yeah, we've relocated because of Dan's unique approach to how he teaches, and there's a lot of hands-on equipment,
Yeah.
tools that need to be left, and labs that are set up and need to remain set up. He's been moved to where you might remember where the old computer lab is. It's adjacent to the case classroom and adjacent to an art room. He's been relocated there. I checked on him again today. It's not the best arrangement, but he's making do. And then Wendy Sanford is the other teacher who's been impacted, and it's caused a little bit of a ripple effect where she moves into another teacher's room who will then vacate and move to another room that's suitable for them. So everyone's working cooperatively on the room arrangements, and it's certainly an inconvenience, far from our ideal, especially for instruction in Dan's classroom and in Wendy's classroom, but we're making do for the time being.
It's a priority to get those up and running as fast as possible.
So I spend a lot of time on the weekends, especially in the winter, going up and down that driveway. And I'll go up in the morning to get things going, and I'll see this bright yellow Jeep parked outside.
Yeah.
And then I'll leave. And I'll come back later in the day, and there's a bright yellow Jeep parked outside the building.
In a different spot.
And usually in the same spot. Sometimes he parks right by the door because you know he's carrying stuff in and out. Usually in. I don't think he really carries it out. And then I'll come back later in the day, and it's still there. And then I'll go back on Sunday, and that bright yellow Jeep is there again.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate that that if there was going to be one ancillary classroom that was going to be affected from going down, that it would be the physics lab, both in terms of the actual material, but that's just, we can replace that stuff. but it's the amount of time and effort he puts in that room to prepare that room so the students get as maximized benefit of the experience of being in there. That's really unfortunate. And you raise it, like, can we incrementally get him back going, because he does such a great job, and I know everybody's working towards it. So that is extremely unfortunate, but maybe he can squeeze a few more new toys out of the whole deal, and in the long run we'll be.
Sure, I know he'll find a way.
Well, again, so fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you looked at it, it happened at the beginning of a vacation week, so it gave us a week to respond,
Exactly.
so.
All right, great.
I did have one question that you just brought to mind for me. With that equipment, once we get it back, there's going to be a lot of setup time. If you could reach out to the teacher and see if there's any way that the community could help in that. If it's going to be, if it's going to be 3 or 4 hours of work to get it all up and running for them, maybe not. If it's going to be much higher than that, and a lot of it's less technical, then I think there are a lot of folks in the community who would probably like to help.
I think one of the things that Dan is exceptional at is reaching out to the community at large, the parents, the alumni. He has a Facebook page. He stays in constant contact with his former students and parents. So I think there'll be an update probably coming from him if that would be helpful. There's a lot of technical expertise in the community, so if that's something that he feels is necessary, I'm sure he'll reach out to folks, and we'll work with him on that if that's needed.
We have a great IT staff as well, so we'll task them to help get that lab up and running as fast as possible as well.
One other question, is the relocation going to affect his AP classes or ability to do labs or whatever for the APs? And do we have a way of
The longer it
mitigating that?
takes to get him up and running, the more significant the impact. It's already impacted him in terms of his general approach to what things they were working on with certain laboratory tables that he doesn't have anymore. But I think, that's the big concern is if we, everyone said it, everyone here tonight, the sooner the better, so that it has less impact. We're talking about Dan, but what we're really talking about is the impact on students. So, let's get him going so he can, one of the students has already come to see me, Katie Bradford, some of you might know her. She's a lot, she's as distraught as Dan. She's one of our leading engineering students at high school, and just a super great kid, terrific, and is really upset by this whole thing and wants to be able to get all the equipment back.
Like the guy said in the Martian, they're going to have to science the heck out of it. All right, thank you. All right, next, access to private property via Shaker Lanes.
So this is just to bring to the school committee attention an issue that's been going on for quite a while. My understanding is the history goes back more than 10 years that I've been here. So on the screen, so what it is, the driveway at Shaker Lane, there's a budding neighbor to the driveway at Shaker Lane who's been accessing the back of his property through the Shaker Lane driveway for a number of years. It's recently come to light and it's really been an issue, again, brought to the forefront because we just had that parking lot repaved and the berms redone and drainage work done. And you can see from the pictures here on the screen that there's been some serious damage both to the roadway and the berm, which is going to cause deterioration, kind of accelerated deterioration with water getting in and things like that. So we've been communicating with the highway department. Keith Bergman is involved. The town legal counsel is also involved. So again, we're just bringing this to school committee attention because it is an abutting property. There's also some suggestions from the highway department that we place some large boulders in that area to block that access. And we just want to clear that with school committee. I don't know if you need to take a vote on it, probably not, but at least be aware of what's going on. Whether you want me to instruct the highway department to put some boulders there to prevent that access. It's recommended by town council, it's recommended by the highway department that that's one intermediary step we take in addition to them following up on the legal side as well. So that's really it.
All right, I'm open to discussion on that. My own personal opinion is that I will leave it to the, it's our driveway in the sense that it leads up to our building, but on the other hand, it's the DPW that does the paving and oversees the paving. And, you know, I think I'll let them weigh in on it, and if they feel like it's going to require some type of intervention, we would like to be appraised of it, but I'll leave the final call to them. Alex, what do you think?
I have pretty much the same take, which is it's good for us to know about, and hopefully it doesn't, you know, continue to escalate. But if it does, it's helpful for us to be aware of it. In terms of the boulders, if that's the recommendation of council and staff at both town and school side, I think that makes complete sense. We've already reached out. Have we notified the abutter that this was a problem a while ago? And then
Yes, and there was legal, as my understanding, and I don't have the exact timing, 12 or 15 years ago, this was an issue as well. There were letters sent back, there was an order from the town, and it's been ignored.
Okay.
I don't know all the history, but...
And then if there's an issue of trying to recuperate that expense for the town, if it is something that we decide to repair, if it's small change.
And let's also be clear on one thing. What we're talking about is strictly the impact on the roadway and the berm, and there's nothing that the property owner is doing that is compromising the operation of the building or the safety of the students.
Correct.
So at that point, I feel like that's why I'm leaning towards
that.
If the town's the one that's got to deal with it, it's the DPW is the one that's got to keep repairing it.
That's correct.
Or see the work that they've done.
Well, and
You
he's
know.
also driving across, part of the picture that's on the screen, part of what you're looking at is school property. In fact,
Right.
my understanding is part of his shed is also built on school property. So there are some other legal issues that town council and town administrator are dealing with.
The real issue is the heavy equipment that's used to clean the driveway.
Right.
That's what's causing the damage.
Right.
And
What I've
also-
heard.
If he was bumping his
bumping his
lawnmower over
plow.
there every now and then, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Right. Correct.
But he's not.
Right.
No, I mean, this has come up at the PMBC meeting. He's using it as a driveway.
Right.
And I don't think there's any record that he has an easement to do so. My concern about the boulders, only in terms of, I want to make sure that the town is taking concrete legal action to, you know, 'cause I don't want him to just drive around the boulders and make a new extended
Right.
driveway.
You're treating the
for him.
symptom, not the disease at that
Right.
point, which is fine. You can do that, but
I
you
mean,
can't ignore the overall
That's what I mean.
problem.
I don't, you know, just putting the boulders there, I don't think addresses the underlying problem that he's just violating the, you know, the town property here. And I think the other part that, and maybe during the course of this, working with town council and this, in the school department there is, you know, property that's under care and custody of the school department versus town property there seems to be a little limbo sometimes. You know, if you talk to some people in the town hall, they say, well, that's a school department issue versus, you know, I view it as a town issue. It's town property. Who's administering the buildings on it is irrelevant to the underlying piece there, but maybe using this as another way of getting clarity on, you know, if we have encroachment issues on town property, whether being managed by the school department or the town, what's the proper POC? Because this has come up on other areas of, like, you know, we have people dumping, you know, yard waste on property. Is it town property? Is it school property? Who's the right person that we're supposed to vector them, to send them a cease and desist type letter to is an ambiguous piece here. And it'd be nice to use this as to get clarity on that, on it, because this, I don't think, is the only instance where town property is being, you know, encroached by there, whether we're administering it or not.
I mean, there is a differentiation between school-owned property and town property. We have in-kind services, though, which muddies the water. In terms of legal definition, it's school property. We're part of the town, but it's still school property.
But I mean, in terms
so-
of, you know, do we have to hire the legal counsel to take care of this, or is it part of what the selectmen manages, the town's responsibility for managing the property? And I just would appreciate some clarity in how this gets resolved.
Right,
My
clarity both
understanding-
in the specific issue, but also in the
In the
overarching,
broader-
when this happens again, you know, who is going to carry the water.
Right.
My understanding, the town council is being involved. And we can certainly solidify that process.
Yeah.
You know, if we were a regional district and we had lots of roads, it would be different, but we don't have the expertise that the town does, since they have a department that deals with roads, so.
Right.
So that will certainly be our preference.
Well, if we were a regional district, we'd also have the regional district's regional district's council
Right.
taking care of this, not
Right.
looking for another organization's council to take care of it.
Right.
While
Well,
we're
you still
looking,
have agreements, yeah.
Yeah.
while we're looking at this issue, if we can figure out if the shed is on school and/or town property or not, that would be good.
Well, it is.
It is.
It's a matter of how town council and how it gets dealt with. And I think town council is working through that issue.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alex brought up the one point, and I would say that if town council and the highway department recommend putting rocks, then put rocks.
All right. Any other?
Nope.
Okay.
That's fine for now.
I'll keep you, if the situation changes or something, I'll bring it back to the committee. Thank you.
All right. All right, the next item on the agenda is a budget update on the process. Just want to go over, we had a meeting on February 12th with the town administrator, Keith Bergman, the town treasurer, Steve Venuti, and assistant town administrator, Bonnie Holston, as well as Paul Glavely and Alan McCray from the FinCom. Steve and Kelly were there with Alex and I on a Friday morning, which is when we generally meet as a budget subcommittee. The meeting was to talk about how best to present the school department's budget request. And the concern that we've had is that the number that has been used when we go to joint meetings with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen is just been our projected salary increase, and, you know, towards what you were talking about a few moments ago, Daryl, it's not been the budget number we have been talking about and that we've presented, because we have shown the expense increases along with the salary increases. So we had to talk about why we're frustrated with that, because our concern is that when the number moves, as it inevitably will, people are going to be confused and/or frustrated that the number is going up, when in reality it's not going up. It is the number that we have been talking about, but the way it's being presented can lead to that type of confusion and frustration. Their point was that they are uncomfortable publishing the overall number until they've had a chance to validate it with information provided by us. And we talked about the best ways to go about doing that, but what we also tried to impart was that if they're not comfortable because they haven't been able to validate the number, then no number is better than a understated number. And that we don't want to see that number published incrementally as different portions of the budget are validated by the town staff. And we were able at the end of the meeting to make sure that we had a good timeline in place to get them the information they needed, and we're working towards that. But we did do is we were scheduled for another joint meeting, and we pushed that out. So the next time we have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom will be on Monday, March 7th, which is a week from this coming Monday. We also, once we had agreed on that, as a budget subcommittee, we realized that our public hearing to go over the budget and finalize our request was originally Thursday, March 10th, which would have been that same week, and really would have only given us a few days after that next joint meeting to be ready. We felt that wasn't a sufficient amount of time, so we have pushed that public hearing to Thursday, March 24th, which is a regularly scheduled meeting, but we're just going to change the agenda. We will meet on Thursday, March 10th, as we were scheduled. It just won't be the public hearing for the budget. It'll be a general agenda. And then we will have the public hearing on the budget on March 24th. The goal, hopefully, or the hope is that at that joint meeting, we will finalize both our budget request, and the town side will have finalized all their numbers. And at that point, we will be able to start having discussions about, this is what we want to do, what can we afford to do, and start getting into discussions about growth in Littleton, the levy, funding from the state, and all the other things that put the pie together. And hopefully we'll get some direction from that meeting that will make the public hearing on the 24th valid and accurate, and get us towards town meeting. So just, fairly straightforward stuff, normal part of the process, just moving some dates around and making sure that we're all on the same page about, as you indicated, what level staffing versus level services means, and trying to get everybody on the same page in that regard. So, Alex, any thoughts or questions you were at the meeting, or anything you want to add?
Just a question with the schedule. Did we cancel that meeting on the 31st? On March 31st?
Yes, so
Yes.
we had, yeah.
Okay.
So we will not meet, and it's all been updated on the website, so anybody who's
Right.
tracking when we're meeting, they'll see it on the website. But yes, we will, so we'll meet the 10th, which is 2 weeks from tonight, and then we will meet the 24th for the public hearing. We will not meet on the 31st, and then the rest of the schedule will roll out from there.
Excellent.
And there's a budget subcommittee meeting with school committee tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Yeah.
For the subcommittee.
The reason
Subcommittee.
I asked is that might just change our timeline a little bit for the school start times. Maybe
Okay.
we were hoping to present at that 31st meeting.
Okay.
Maybe we'll be ready by the 24th. Maybe we won't
Well,
have room for it.
24th, we won't do it anyway, because that's only going to be the public hearing on the
Okay,
budget.
I thought even though it starts at 6 and then 7.
No, that starts at 7. That
Oh,
starts
I
at
see,
7.
okay.
You know, we don't mind putting like a few housekeeping items on that, but typically we just want the budget,
Okay.
the
No, that's
public
fine.
budget meeting to be the
I
public.
thought we were
budget
starting it
meeting.
the hour earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So look for that maybe April 7th. Double, let you know.
I might not be as kind there. I was just looking back through our notes on the joint meeting we held on the 14th of September, when the first sets of budget stuff came out. I attended that meeting, and the concept of the level service budgets and the mission budgets presentations from the town came up, and there was a set of numbers presented that didn't represent what we had provided to the board of selectmen for our budget request. And I made the point during that meeting, and it was followed up with a motion seconded and voted by the selectmen that recognized that we had a required service budget. So this confusion about numbers, we never submitted a number that's currently being bandied about as our request. And it's really a little irritating that we had tried to establish the dialogue in the process early. The selectmen recognize the challenges we have in presenting the budget in the same terminology, and extended their motion to include the request that we would have for required services, yet that is still not reflected in any of the budget presentation numbers being used by the Board of Selectmen. And I guess I'm not sure how much longer I really want to wait until that gets addressed there.
You bring up a valid point, and it was certainly, part of the discussion, that not necessarily in the detail, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because it is black and white. I mean, we did have a meeting, and there was a motion made and voted on. So to that end, as the chair, I will take that direction and go back to the chair of the selectmen, because that's the other thing that we talked about was, obviously, the town administrator and his admin team, as we rely on our admin team, have significant amount of input, and rightfully so, on, how the budget is shaped, how it's going to impact the town, where the issues are, where the risks are, things like that. But at the same time, we do our budget, we are the school committee, and we have our staff, and I will go back to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and just let them know that as a board, we want to make sure that we did this, we thought this was going to happen. It's their responsibility, because ultimately, as we would hold our staff accountable to the direction we gave them, we would expect the Board of Selectmen to hold their staff accountable to the direction they gave their staff.
Because I don't want, the way you talked about it, we have not been changing our budget on a weekly basis. We went, in with what we felt we needed. I mean, you brought it up at the full board. I don't think we voted the number, but we approved you submitting
Right,
the number
exactly.
there. And my understanding is if anything, it's been trimmed a little bit as the numbers have been tightened up. It's not been bouncing around or any other phrase that would draw confusion to what's happening during the budget process. So I'm a little concerned about some of the terms that got used during your discussion of the meeting.
What I do want to add to that is the particular point of contention that town staff had was not about, is this a mission versus a level staffing versus level service or required service, but it was also in regard to, we gave them a number, and they said, well, we came up with a different number, so we're going to use that different number, which is very similar but different to that language that we agreed to in September. And I'm hoping that when we go to the selectmen and say,
But our board's responsibility is to set and recommend
exactly
the
what we said.
budget to the selectmen, not to have that budget be told to us and how we would implement it here. So,
and from a statute perspective, we don't even need to, we recommend a number to the selectmen, but we have complete autonomy over how we spend that number. And that was something that we discussed as well. And that was another
okay.
point.
And readily acknowledged by the town administrator. But you're right, and I think what I'm taking away from this, and I think is a very good point that you're making, Darrell, is it would be good because there was no representation. We didn't ask for representation from the selectmen at that meeting, but it would be good just to go back chair to chair, which is, that's exactly what it's designed to be.
Yep.
And just reiterate and make sure that they understand the direction we're coming from and what we're asking for and the expectation, and make sure that they acknowledge that and acknowledge it towards their staff.
Right, and I fully appreciate, as both the taxpayer and, recognizing the responsibilities of the Board of Selectmen, if they ask us to sharpen our pencil and make sure that the numbers are right and they're tight, that is fully within their purview there. But directing anything more specific than that, I think, is not really, it's crossing the boundaries of responsibility there.
And also, again, relative to the fact that our budget simply doesn't conform to the way their budgeting goes because of the nature of what the services we provide relative to the nature of the services that the town side provides, which is very staff headcount oriented, where ours is much more of a hybrid between our staff and the services, the expenses that we pay to provide the services that we have to, that we're required to. And sometimes I think that trying to fit that square peg in a round hole, I think, is where we're all losing some clarity. And I think we need to straighten that out.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Mark?
So I share some of Darrell's concerns. My question is, you said that the town side hasn't had a chance to vet our numbers, or what's the delay and what do we expect? How do we expect that to happen in the next 2 weeks?
Well, we've already been working on it since then, so, and that was already ongoing.
And before that.
Exactly. They have already received a significant amount of information from our admin team relative to the numbers we had submitted, and it was really just an issue of finishing up and closing the gap with some of the, because what we had given them up to this point was an analysis of our staffing and what the increases were going to be for our staffing. And Steve Mark and Steve Venuti have gone back across that, and there was some questions that were raised and some questions that were answered, so that's fine. And that's obviously a big chunk of it, but what they were looking for is some background information on the other drivers of the budget, primarily the special education spending and increases and things like that. Steve has that, he's already given it to them, and they have it, so now it's just them coming back again with questions or concerns, and as Darrell said, just making sure that the numbers are right and tight. So, and that's the thing. This isn't new. That process goes on every year, and it has every year since I've been involved. What sometimes changes is the methodology for delivery or the detail level or how they want to see it presented, and sometimes it just takes us a while to adapt to a new request or evaluate whether or not that request is truly valid or meaningful, and if it's not, we'll ask them to reconsider how they want that, and sometimes it's not the providing the information, it's making the determination of exactly what we're going to provide in the right context. And once we agree to that, doing the work is just doing the work. So it's a little bit of both, of going back and forth like that.
Okay.
All right. Good. All right. So I'm going to that one out. At this point, we're going to circle back to our second opportunity for interested citizens. All right, seeing none, we'll go to subcommittee reports. PMBC.
So PMBC continues. There's been a lot of effort working on the Council on Aging kitchen. Hopefully that is not relevant to here, but it's been taking quite a bit of time to get that fully resolved and taken care of. Right now, we're working on finalizing the recommendations for the facility capital expenditures for maintenance, major maintenance items next year. A big portion of it's going to go we're going to categorize it as non-street paving in order to start capturing the, as one line item, all of the parking lot work, instead of trying to allocate it specifically, by sub-project there, so that there's a little bit more flexibility in handling the cost differences that come up during the piece there on it. There was a couple of action items from the last one. We were talking about the EMG report recommended replacing the fire alarm panel at the high school. Steve Mark followed up with the fire chief. He said that it's not critical that it be replaced this year. We further talked, the chairman of the Board of Selectmen is going to task the fire chief to give him a report on all the fire alarm panels and in town and a replacement schedule for those, and then we'll start budgeting those as part of a more organized plan rather than just out of the report there, so that because he needs to get a better picture, because it's not a one building thing. All of our buildings are in sort of the same boat for what generation fire panels that we have there. There's no code issue with the panels or operation issues. It's more of a, at which point does it make sense to start cycling them. There was another thing on the Russell Street doors, the classroom doors. They talked with the code compliance officers. There's no code issue with our doors, so we're not planning on just arbitrarily replacing all 30 classroom doors at this point. What we would do is I'd asked is if we start seeing door failures, delamination, or other things there, we actively start scheduling them for replacement on it. And then the mythical univents. So they're no myth, they actually exist.
They do exist.
They are. I think we're going to try to budget to get the last 6 or 7 of them done. And there's a little, we're just trying to resolve with the town piece there. $75,000 was set aside in the FY16 budget, and we're trying to track down whether that money was spent, but I think the money that we spent on Univents was actually the 15 money on it. So we may already have the money set aside for these next 7. So that's what we're trying to confirm and then solidify that for the town meeting on it. So the money may already be there.
I think we spent part of what was allocated. When we did the univentilators this summer, we had funding prior to that.
Yeah.
Authorized it, we used up, and then we tapped into a
I've
portion.
been trying to coordinate with the town the finance office there on which accounts were actually charged for all of the things there. So I think all the previous accounts were charged for it. I don't think the current account was charged for it. One of the discrepancies we have, we don't have in our warrants, we don't have the specific account code that the warrant is against. So when they get it, they bill it against available funds versus an account code. And since we're not tracking 100%, she may have used some of the previous account codes for some of those expenses.
Right, I think I have, I'll check in my office over the next couple of days. I think I have.
I'll send you my latest spreadsheet on that too. I mean, we're fairly close on it, except for a couple of projects now. But anyway, that stuff is all underway, and I think we're making good progress on there. So probably more information than you wanted, but PMBC is actually busy.
No, it's good to know that you're in there, keeping track, and it makes us feel good and confident. All right, budget subcommittee we kind of already did, so we don't need to go again. And policy subcommittee.
Policy. It's still covering the patties with the untearable bags there. So what I have is the second reading of the policies that we did last time. I did the changes that we talked about in them, so you'll see a second motion for the revised 2 policies, and one we've been referred to legal to make sure if we want to actually make any abbreviation edits to that there. So that part of it is fairly straightforward.
All right. Do you want to knock that out?
Yeah, we could, if we could get a motion for the motion, excuse me, the motions are listed in the thing there for somebody to do.
All right, we're going to make a motion.
I'll do it.
All right.
No, smart.
Go ahead.
I make a motion for a second reading of the following reviewed policies: JB, JEB, JF, JFBB, JHA, JHD, JI, JID, JICC, JICH, JIE, JIH, JJIV, JLC, JLCD, JP, JQ, JRA, JRD, and JRD.
Second.
Somebody please.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion on those particular policies and the motion made regarding them? No? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay.
I'm going to try this one before putting the candy in my mouth. I make a motion for a second reading of the following revised policies, JICE and JICFA.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion on those particular two policies? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
All right.
And then attached also is, for this, again, just continued input from the committee before I finalize them for further circulation is policies AD, which is education philosophy, and KHD, which was the draft advertising one. I incorporated the one missing gender identity piece in the advertising one, and I just, again, would appreciate any committee inputs. I know, Mike, you were going to check on a couple things. I'd just like to keep these moving through so I can kind of get them scheduled at some point for...
So, to that end, before I ask the rest of the committee whether or not they have particular input tonight, what do we, so, let's take them one at a time.
Yep.
And let's talk about AD, educational philosophy first.
Yep.
So my question is, do we feel like we need any particular community input or meetings or forums to allow for community input, to solicit community input?
That one I didn't necessarily think so, because I was trying to do is capture what we had in our vision documents and our current policies, which are kind of on the generic side, and capture this. This is more tailored towards the division district vision plan here on it that we have been actually working with the last couple of years here. So this is I wasn't necessarily going to think we needed a specific public hearing on this one.
Specific to that question, is that okay with you, Alex? Do you have any thoughts or variants on that?
Yes. I think when we did our summer retreat this year, we talked a lot about educational philosophy. I think this is a great start, and I'm like that it aligns very clearly with our vision, our mission, and our strategic plan. I would love it if there was some way for us to get a little more of what we talked about over the summer at the retreat.
Okay, well, hold on one second.
Yeah.
Hold on. So
Sorry.
you're fine with not soliciting any further community input or like an open session about this particular policy? And I'm going to get to everything you just said in a minute.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So, sure, as in, I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I'm not sure in terms of
I mean, obviously,
It would
we
be-
are going to have further discussion about this, and it's going to be on the agenda. So anybody who
And it
is
is a
motivated
public-
to
yeah.
come and speak about educational philosophy is going to be given an opportunity to do so. It's just that there's another level of soliciting community input that we've used in the past, which I think you're going to see what's going to happen. When we go to the next policy, I think we're going to have a different point of view about
Right.
that one. But I just want to go through the same process for both, so.
Right. So I think that there are a number of policies where it's just going to be, you elected the school committee and we're going to do our best. And if you have any feedback, you're welcome to come and join us. The educational philosophy one I think is a little deeper, and I think we take a good stab at it. Part of me says it would be great if we could have a forum around this to get more community buy-in. Maybe no one shows up, but at least we go through the motion and say, this is an issue that's so big that it's not just a matter of policy, it's a matter of, because it's literally a matter of philosophy, we want to welcome everyone in sort of an inclusive environment. On the other hand, I don't think any of us want to be here for 3 hours talking about educational philosophy because we'll lose the actual education issues that we're trying to work on, and we'll be, sometimes we can get through conversations about the Shaker Lane berm without a particular educational philosophy. And so I think there's a trade-off there. I'm not set one way or another. If there was a opportune moment for us to say educational philosophy, let's talk about it, that'd be great, but I don't think we should go out of our way to do it. If there's any way we can include that in our budget hearing, because when we talk about, I'm just spitballing here, so maybe that's a terrible idea, but when we talk about budgets, we talk about numbers, but we also talk about our values, and I think we do a relatively good job of that every year, so maybe that's an opportunity to say, what do you think of that? On the other hand, it might be two giant subjects put in one meeting, which is just a terrible combination, so.
Okay, so I asked a yes or no question, got a definite maybe?
Yeah.
Mark, what do you
I
think?
got it, maybe.
I don't think there needs, for the educational philosophy one, I don't think there needs to be a special hearing.
Here, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of gave you a hint, I didn't think we needed one.
Right.
What I would suggest, though, is in terms of where we're going in the future, one of the things I recommend that we start thinking about is actually thinking about what does a mission budget start looking like? And using this, our district
That's a
plan,
great idea.
as the framing documents for that discussion, of which that can also engender the discussion, are we too wide? You know, this is not set in stone for the next 10 years. We can always revisit this policy and update it as appropriate type of thing. But I'd like to perhaps use this in conjunction with some other forum that we're doing there in order to, help refine the process there. So that's where I'm coming at.
That sounds interesting to me. What do you think, Alex? Yeah. I mean, I think that, why don't we do this? So then, given that we're not going to do a direct community, open meeting about educational philosophy, what kind of timeline are you looking for us to solidify our comments and feedback and lock this one
So,
down?
again, it's not in terms of rushing the process here. What I wanted to do was intentionally put it on the agenda the way I did a couple of times here, to bring it to the forefront, let people know that we were talking about it, get a draft. It's in our minutes now. It's able to be circulated here. I would like maybe within the next month.
Okay.
So I would like to wrap it by the end of the school year.
Perfect.
So that actually maybe, by election time, so that the sitting board can set, the,
So I think that's great, and I think that will give plenty of opportunity. We'll continue to talk about it, and we're going to have feedback on it.
Right.
And that will, allow the public, anybody that is specifically interested in this policy can come and chime in. And then relative to the comment you made a moment ago, I think that would be great. Lock it down, pass it, and codify it as we go through the end of this particular board's business through this year, and then maybe we can jump right off using it towards a mission budget discussion, early in, our process as we see the new board.
Right.
And go through that. I think that would be a terrific way to go about it, and let's go ahead and
makes
do
sense.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So now, given that, if any comments specifically about the policy and the verbiage and anything you'd like to see or comment to Daryl that he can take out of here, go ahead.
I told him I would read more into it over the last 2 weeks, and I got swept away again, so I'll try to do that. I do think that we're going to have so many other opportunities for people to be in this room anyway over the next couple of months, between budget presentation, between school start times presentation probably coming up, between advertising, between everything else. I don't think there's going to be a shortage of people saying, oh, maybe I'll go to school committee tonight. And then my only question would be, can you continue to include it in the packet, even if we're not looking for a motion on it? So people are aware.
Okay.
So just procedure-wise, if you have comments, send them directly to me. I'll incorporate them into the document. I won't republish them until we publish the minutes, because I don't want to do a conversation,
Meeting long, yeah. Great.
offline there. But I do need to consolidate the inputs there, but I'm not going to redistribute them individually there, just because I don't want to.
Mark, any comments or on the
I think
policy
it's a
itself?
good plan, and I'll send you some wordsmithing.
All right, so that we have a direction on AD, educational philosophy. Now, let's tackle KHB, advertising in schools. So we'll go kind of through the same process. The question is, would we think that it would be advisable to schedule an opportunity for the public to specifically come and talk about this in addition to rather than incorporate it into a typical agenda. If we put a half an hour towards it at the beginning prior to one of our meetings starting. Alex, your thoughts on that?
I'm fine with that.
I mean, you think it's worthwhile to do that? Yeah. Okay. Mark?
I agree.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah,
So
no, I was leaning that way.
People
This is a
gonna
fairly
opinion.
emotional topic with
Right.
people also, and like I said, I've tried to balance across a bunch of spectrums there, and want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear from people if this is not hitting where they think it needs to go.
So to that, rather than having an in-depth discussion about the current wording, let's let that process unfold, and I will leave it to you to work with the superintendent to figure out what the timing, the correct timing is, and making sure that we do it with enough opportunity to publish notice and let people, think about it and get in here and take a look and give us their feedback.
And again, if there's any intermediate feedback, just provide it directly to me there, and I'll see about incorporating it there, because you did have a couple of points that from the last time that.
And your timeline for that would be the same?
Again, I would like to try to close. This one here has been probably 4 years in the works here, and I'd like to maybe get closure on this one by the end of the school year.
One, reading through the policy, the one comment I would have on it is if we want to differentiate between in the school versus on the school grounds, right? Maybe there's a different there might be different things where what you can put up around the track or the football field versus in the school, where it's more of one's a captive audience and one's a public audience. More.
Good point. Good point.
Because your target audience and age group also changes then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Anything else on that? All right, you have our direction.
Okay, thank you.
All right, does that take care of policy subcommittee?
Yes, it does.
All right. Do we have any other business that we need to?
No, we do not.
All right, do we require an executive session? No. All right, I will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made second, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, opposed? I didn't think so. All right, thank you, everyone. Good night.